Hi everybody, I'm Susan. We're going to talk today about adaptation. Adaptation is what allows you to live in a particular environment. So for example, we as human beings need to breathe air, we need food, we need water. And because sometimes it gets very rainy or very cold, we need some kind of shelter. Well, animals are adapted to live in a particular environment too. They can't put on clothes, so they have to have in their bodies everything that they need. For example, it might be a difference in their feathers or their fur or other parts of their body that help them to live in a particular environment. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is take the paper and pencil that your teacher told you to bring and draw a picture of a bird. But this is going to be a very special bird. It's going to be a bird that lives near the ocean, and it takes advantage of its environment. So, for example, its favorite food is fish. So you need to draw a bird that would be a good fishing bird and a good swimming bird. So as you're drawing your picture, think about its feet and its beak and anything else that would help it be suited for its environment. Then we'll go look at some birds.
Oh, hi everybody! My name is Ashley and I'm an interpreter here at Cliff State Beach. And I'm out here on the beach looking at all the birds that we have here and seeing what I can see on both the pier and on the ship. Now, if you look behind me, you can sort of see that there are in fact a lot of birds out there. And you might be wondering, what are those birds out there? Well, we're going to be learning more about those birds in a few minutes, but Susan just had you draw a picture of your own bird and think about where it lives, what sort of beak does it have, does it live on land or in the water? And so while I was looking at these birds, I decided to draw my own. So let me introduce you all to my bird. This is Peter the pelican. And I need a pointer. And I seem to have, I don't know where I left it, but, oh, here it is. This happens to be a pelican feather. So we're going to use that as my pointer. And you'll notice on my drawing that this pelican, or Peter, has a large beak. And this large beak is used to gulp up water as Peter dives down into the water. And all that extra water will be drained out of the side. So all he's left with are the fish on the inside. Pelicans also have webbed feet. And these webbed feet are used for what? If you said that they're used for swimming, you're absolutely correct. Pelicans use their webbed feet much like you would use flippers or fins when you're swimming in a pool. Now, not all the birds that we have here are found just on the pier and the boat. We have birds on the beach as well. And so, I have another friend to introduce you to. This is Gabby the godwit. And take a look at Gabby. And what are some of the similarities and differences between a godwit and a pelican? Think about that for a second, and we're going to fly back into the visitor center to meet up with another one of our friends to talk more about the special birds here at Seacliff. So, everybody stand up in your chairs or get up off of your couch, wherever you're tuning in from, and become a bird. And so, I'm going to put this stuff down. And I'm ready to fly over to the visitor center, So let's fly over as a flock and I'll meet you back there. Hi everybody, we made it to the bird room in the visitor center. Let's listen to Chris and learn more about the birds that we have here at Seacliff.
Hi, my name is Chris, and I am a volunteer here at Seacliff Visitor Center. And I'm going to talk to you about the adaptations that you kind of learned about earlier, and we're going to see exactly how they work and how they assist in animals eating and catching their prey. Keep in mind that unlike you, that have teeth and arms and can use knives and forks and that type of thing, birds have no teeth. And birds don't have arms that they can use to eat with. So they have to figure out other ways to find breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And talking about adaptations, think about what we have all gone through just with this COVID pandemic. Wearing of masks, social distancing, all of that. That's all kind of adapting. We're adapting to do what's best for everyone. So anyway, let's start with the pelican. And the pelican is over here. And before I do that, let me talk about what we're going to be looking at are 3 different types of beaks and 3 different types of feet, because they're critically important for how these animals get their food. So if we look at the pelican first, and I love the pelican because he's such an odd-looking creature. And if you look at his feet, he has webbed feet, much like fins that we use. This is the human adaptation for swimming in the water. Animals don't need that. They have their own fins. So the pelican has webbed feet, and that will tell you that he can function in the water. He can swim. And if you look at his beak, that's really strange. He has probably one of the most unique beaks of any animal. And you see a wrinkly, baggy-looking thing underneath, and that is his pouch. And that's how he gathers food, because he fishes. He fishes by diving. He'll go way up in the air looking for food. He has tremendous eyesight. Sees maybe a school of fish, and then he dives straight down and opens up the pouch. It fills with water and hopefully a bunch of fish. And then he comes up to the surface, and very cleverly designed, he adapts, or he has been adapted, so that all the water drains out. And he's just left with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And he can swallow them easily. So whenever you see the webbed feet like that, you probably can figure that that is going to be a bird that is good in the water. So that's the pelican. Now let's go over here. Different kind of feet. We've got the great egret right over here, and you can see he's got really long legs, and his feet are kind of what we call splayed. And so you probably can tell yourself he's not going to do too well swimming, but he might do really, really well standing in water, standing in marshy places, and he can spread his toes out so he's stable. And then if you look at his beak, he's got a very, very sharp beak. You will find egrets in marshy places, and they're always looking for small little reptiles, frogs, little fish, that type of thing, to stab with their very, very sharp pointed beak in order to get their food. And their neck is shaped in that curled shape so that they can whip it really, really quickly and grab their prey very fast. Interesting story about adaptation is one day an egret was found at a restaurant, a local restaurant right here, and people were eating outside, and they saw this egret come and land down by the koi pond. And all of a sudden, he just darted his neck really, really fast, stabbed a huge koi, which was probably about 6 or 8 inches, and gobbled it down right in front of all of the people that were having their lunch. And the restaurant was furious, as koi are very, very expensive fish. But, we go to restaurants, he figured out where the food was, and took advantage of it. So that's a clever animal that can adapt like that. So then let's look at the cormorant. The cormorant, if you look at the feet, they should give you a clue as to whether he's able to go into the water. He has webbed feet, so that tells you he does. He also has a very slim body, which makes him an excellent diver. And then his beak is such that he can dive down and then, like with a pincher type of thing, grab prey as he's diving. And he's capable of diving like 40 feet down into the water and grabbing the fish and coming back up. He was so good at catching fish that Japanese and Chinese fishermen would use him as their fishing pole. They would put a loop around its neck so that he couldn't swallow the fish, send him down, and he would catch the fish, they'd haul him back up, take the fish out of his mouth, and send him back down again. So this is how he was able to get his food. Then, so we have webbed feet here, we have splayed feet. Now let's look at a different kind of foot altogether. And if we look at the hawks, these are two red-tailed hawks. Probably one of our best displays in the visitor center, in my opinion. And if you look at their feet, they're not going to be able to swim very well. It used to be an awful lot of hard work if they had to swim. And if you look at their beaks are short and sharp, and that is for shredding. So they are capable of grabbing their prey and then using their beaks to shred the meat off and eat it. And these birds have incredible eyesight. They will soar up in the air, and they're quite popular around this area. You'll see them all the time, you'll hear them. They will soar until they find something, a gopher or a mole, and then all of a sudden they will swoop down and grab it. Much like, this is a great example. We have this poor little mouse, and then here comes the hawk. Poor little unsuspecting mouse gets nailed, and that's exactly how he catches his prey. And then he uses his incredibly sharp beak to be able to shred the animal. We have a local peregrine falcon in the park that often can be seen with pigeons or some of the smaller birds that are on the pier. So you've seen three different types of beaks and feet, and each of those are instrumental in how this particular animal gets its food. And it's important for their survival. And it's interesting how they do develop. And who knows exactly what caused the development, like of the pelican, which I think is so odd or strange, but that's what it is. It works. Now let's look at we're going to look at the godwit. And the godwit, if you look at the legs, they're splayed. He has toes that spread out, and that could give you an indication that he's going to be on the land. He's not going to be a swimmer. And godwits are here at the beach. They come in during the winter times, and they can be seen right on the shoreline. And their feet are so that they can wade in the water a little bit. Their beak, which is kind of interesting, very sharp, very long, and you probably have figured out they use it for probing into the sand. So they will walk along, and you'll see them every once in a while just digging their beak into the sand. You might want to ask yourself, well, how do they know where to dig? Well, apparently their feet are sensitive enough. They're in the wet sand. They can feel movement underneath the sand, and that's where they will dig in and catch little sand crabs, whatever other little animals that they can find. So that's another one. A different kind of beak, again, designed for the food that they find most delicious for them. So this one, the loon, you can't see his feet very well. You're going to have to take my word for it. But he has feet that allow him to swim. They're more like webbed feet, and you can see he has a sharp beak. So that tells you he's probably going to stab his prey. What's remarkable about the loon is that he is able to dive 240 feet down into the ocean and get his the fish that he feeds on at that depth. What's amazing in terms of the adaptation, because his bones had to develop in such a way that he could withstand the pressure of 240 feet. If you and I dove in and went down just with no protection at all, 240 feet would absolutely flatten us like a pancake. So we would have, we would be instantly killed. But again, he's developed in a way that aids him to be able to get his food. And his sharp beak is able to spear, the fish that he's trying to capture. And he is a bird that you will very, very rarely see on land because his feet are or his legs are way behind him. So if he was on land, he would not be able to walk very well. So again, he's totally adapted to the ocean where he primarily lives. So one of my favorites right here, this is the surf scoter. Now, again, his beak is a little bit different, but his feet are webbed, so that tells you that he's going to be in the ocean or in the water, and that he is going to be adapted very nicely to that. And they are only here certain times of the year as well. But if you see his beak, it's very, very different. It's not a real sharp beak. It's not, like a pointy one. So it's more almost like a small scoop of sorts. And you will see them right out in the surf line when they're here. And that's where they find, the food the small fish that they ultimately feed on. What I love about the surf scoter is you can watch them for hours right in the surf line, and they will never ever get trashed by a wave. They're absolutely wonderful surfers. But they have adapted to their environment and adapted the parts that make them the most successful in finding the food that they need. So one other bird, and we don't give this bird enough respect because it's probably one of the smartest, cleverest birds on the planet, and that is the lowly seal. Our exhibit doesn't even give them anything but a stuffed animal. So here we have the lowly seagull. The feet tell you that it can handle water, they're webbed, and its beak is kind of not remarkable, so he probably just opens up and he'll pick at things and eat at them, kind of like a hawk. But he is one of the most populous birds on the beach. Whenever I go bird watching and I'm walking on the beach and I'll look at a bird and I go, oh, it's just an old seagull. But seagulls have adapted in a variety of ways that makes them very, very successful. One thing is that they will eat anything. It doesn't matter whether it is garbage from the dump, trash can at the schoolyard, other dead like birds, they'll eat anything. They have been even known to steal fish right out of the pouch of a pelican. So these guys, because they are able to eat any kind of food and survive on it, they are very, very populous throughout the world. Anywhere you go, you will see these gulls. And I misspoke, I called them seagulls. They are not seagulls. They are gulls because they are found everywhere. They're not just in the sea. You'll find them in lakes, you'll find them just about everywhere in the world. So basically, I think I've given you an overview of how the beaks and the feet of various birds are instrumental in how they get their food.
So we just spent some time learning from Chris about all the different adaptations that our friends in the sky have. From sharp beaks that are used to tear prey, like the hawks have, to long, slender beaks, like the godwit. All of these birds at Seacliff are adapted to life here. Now, there's another group of animals here that have also adapted to life in the ocean. So, I want to introduce you to one of my friends who is part of this next group of animals that we're going to learn about. So, everybody put your fins together for my good friend Otis the otter. So, Otis is a sea otter. And as you can see, he's very furry. Looks like he might need a haircut. But he's gonna be part of the marine mammals that Susan is going to teach us all about now. So, without further ado, take it away, Susan.
Hi everyone, it's Susan again. We're going to look at some other kinds of animals, starting with this one right here. Now I'd like you to look at that otter, that's a sea otter, and think about how do you know it's not a bird? So you think for a minute, and then let's look at it. While you're thinking, I'm going to tell you a little bit about otters. Otters always live in or near water, but they can be in rivers or lakes or the ocean. And this is a sea otter. You can tell because it's wrapped up in some kelp. Okay, so I know you've thought of all these good things. You know it's not a bird because it doesn't have feathers and it doesn't have wings, but it's still adapted to where it lives. Take a look at its feet. Those are webbed feet, almost as good as the pelicans. And then take a look at its front paws or arms. And you can see it's got hands. It's got fingers. This is an animal that can actually use its hands like tools. One of the things that otters like to do is take a rock and something like a sea urchin, which is one of its favorite foods, and they can use the rock. They put the urchin on their chest, they take the rock in their paw, their hand, they beat up on the urchin or whatever animal it is that they want, and then they can get the meat out. So that's an animal that's adapted to eating a variety of food. One of its favorites is urchins. One of the other ways that it's really well adapted to where it lives is its fur. No feathers, but fur. But it lives in the ocean, and if you've ever gone in our ocean, you know that can be quite cold. So the otter has 2 layers of fur, and the inner layer, the one closest to its body, is waterproof. Its fur, you're going to get to see it up close for a moment here, has so many hairs in it that unfortunately for a while people thought that would make great hats and coats, and so they were out killing otters for that. We don't do that anymore. But it has so much fur in it that on that 1 square inch of fur is more than your cat or your dog has on its entire body. So that's a pretty impressive animal. You'll notice it's lying in the kelp, sort of wrapped up in the kelp. And it's adapted to do that so that it can get a rest. It can lie on its back and have a nice rest. And I hope you can see the pictures behind it. That's a whole raft of otters, that's what they're called, taking a nap together in the ocean. So that's one kind of animal that's very well adapted to its environment. Another is the whale. Now, you all know probably that in Monterey Bay we get whales. We get humpback whales and gray whales, occasionally a killer whale, and sometimes a blue whale. I'd like you to think a little bit about the size of whales. So Chris showed you some birds before. I have a piece of whale here that's bigger than any of the birds that Chris showed you. And this piece of whale is just its vertebra. I put my hand here so you can get an idea of how big it is. Now, if you put your own hand on your back, you'll feel you have little knobs going right up and down your spine. That's your vertebra. They're probably about 1 inch. Look at this. This is a whale's rib. Again, put your hands on your body, feel your own ribs. You have probably a dozen of them, and they're maybe 8 inches long. Look at the size of this. It's probably, I bet it's over 6 feet. That is quite a big rib. Those are probably from gray whales. So the gray whale up here is one of the more common ones we see. We see grays and humpbacks a lot here as they travel from their northern to their southern homes. But the biggest whale in the entire world and the biggest animal in the entire world is the blue whale. And if you look at this picture, you can see that they're pretty much drawn to size. So the killer whale is about 1/3 the size of the blue whale picture. To give you an idea of the size of the blue whale, They can run 75 to 100 feet long. The largest one ever found was about 110 feet. And to give you a sense of that, because I'm about 5.5 feet, that's a lot more feet than me. But if you took 3 or 4 city buses and lined them up one after the other, that's about the size of the blue whale. One of the strange adaptations of the blue whale is that, big as it is, it eats a tiny, tiny little piece of food called a krill. Krills are related to shrimp and crabs and animals like that. Well, if you've got an animal that big and it's going to live on little fish that are maybe 3-4 inches long, little crustaceans that are 3-4 inches long, it needs a lot of them, up to 6 tons a day. And the whale has in its mouth sort of spiny looking things. It's called baleen. They're feathery looking sometimes. They're designed to filter the krill. So the whale sucks in lots and lots of water. All the water goes away, and what's left is the krill. 6 tons later, the whale is happy. He's had enough to eat, or she's had enough to eat, and they're done for the day. And that's about it for mammals.
Thank you all for joining us here at Seacliff to learn about the birds that we have here. We hope you can join us here at Seacliff and visit the visitor center when it's safe to do so. But for now, see you later.